And now for the main event of Set 2. Green. Like the previous videos, let's go over the vanillas real quick. This time around, since this is Green's introduction to the game, there are some important ones to talk about. The most obvious staple card, of course, is Map Butterfly. 5 stars. It's the Chad zero-cost spirit with no downsides. It's also an insectoid, which is important for Armor Tree Deity's effect to give it Swift. The other green vanilla I think is going to see tons of play is Fire Ant-Man. 4 stars. I don't think this necessarily gets included in every green deck, but it's an important turn 1 spirit that reaches 4K, which is good enough. Speaking of, we also have Ant-Man Soldier, 3 stars. I think the more aggro green decks will appreciate having this, and the Fire Ant-Man together. Beyond that, I don't think this card quite makes the cut in other green decks. For similar reasons, I'm also giving Unpyoru 3 stars. I think aggro decks might play this. It just has good stats for the cost. The rest of the vanillas get a 1 star for not being good enough. Sorry, Fluffmingo. Bullet Ray, you are not. Now, let's get into the meat of the review. Green has 2 major themes for this set: exhausting spirits and ramping cores. Exhausting the opponent's spirits is going to be the most important aspect of the new color. The question going into this format is which cards do the job the best, and which ones aren't going to make the cut. So, with that being said, let's start with the starter deck cards. Gale Phoenix, 1 star. This is more or less a worse version of Tokiwa. Although this in combination with the new Nexus Giantwood Castle Keep is pretty funny. But we'll talk about that card later. Emerald Greatbird Aldeed. This is the slightly more expensive version of Emerald Pincer, with a bonus level 2 effect attached. Having an immediate exhaust effect attached to a body is very important for putting pressure on the opponent, and it helps that this bird starts at 4K to avoid Burning Force and similar cards. That said, I can see this not quite making the cut in green decks because of it being a little too expensive. I'll give it 3 stars. It's going to take some experience to see whether or not there's room for this card. The starter deck comes with 2 Swift Spirits. Viscount Minoba sucks and gets a 1 star. Leaf Wolf is great and gets 4 stars. Leaf Wolf is a big part of why Green will be able to close out games and survive opposing turns that it shouldn't. That said, there is a part of me that wonders if Green will always have room for the second best Swift Spirit. That's the only reason I'm not giving it the 5-star treatment. Explosive Charger Brandboar, 3 stars. This is going to be the face of a rogue green deck where you give this spirit Confront with Lightning Aura and just mow down your opponent's spirits. At least, that's the idea. In reality, I don't think it's going to be that simple a lot of the time, but I can see this getting some success. Viridian Dragon Rider Grun. I might get heat for this one. 3 stars. That effect to ramp 2 cores upon destruction certainly looks cool, and it's going to see experimentation alongside Brandboar for its BP boosting effect. It's not a bad card, I just think there are better, earlier options for ramping cores. Caprahorn. 5 stars. Its effect is secondary to the fact that it's a 1-cost 1 reduction spirit. It's a staple in aggro green, and it will also see play in all of the other green decks. Metangol. 3 stars. I want to like this card. This card is great on your first turn, but gets worse as the game progresses. That said, I don't think it's a bad option for ramping cores, and it will see some play. Sacred Tree Stump City, 1 star. Its second effect is too expensive for it to see play over Netherworld depths, and the first effect is only okay. Airborne Crag, 2 stars. The second effect will get some experimentation out of this card, but I think it'll ultimately be not good enough to see competitive success. Savage Power, 2 stars. Giving Swift to a spirit is cute, but I don't think this is good enough to replace other burst cards. Needle Shot, 4 stars. Even with Thorn Prison being a card, this will see play as another flash timing exhaust trick. Multiple Cores, 2 stars. This card is bait. A card whose only purpose is to ramp a single core is not good enough. You want to at least get a body out of an effect like that, which is why I think even Metangol is better than this. And the burst effect isn't good enough. I think it'll see some experimentation, but nothing more. Now to the cards in the main set, False Gods, and the tournament promos. Starting with the big bird itself, the Bane of Void Lords, Tokiwa. God, this pains me. 3 stars. I love this card, and I do think it'll see some success. Unfortunately, there's another green X-Rare that I think is better to build a deck around, even if it's more expensive than Tokiwa. Onyx Bird Yada Gloss, 1 star. I like the idea of the card, but needing 8 cores for its second effect really holds it back from actually being good. Shrike and Kingfisher are 1-star cards. These Swift Spirits are completely outclassed by the tournament promo Scope Owl, which I give 5 stars. This card is basically just extra copies of Thorn Prison. You can use it strictly as a battle trick on the opponent's turn, or you can use it as a way to put pressure on your turn by swinging with it. This card is amazing, and I hate that it's a tournament promo, because that means it's going to be really expensive for a playset. And now the X-Rare I was referring to earlier when talking about Tokiwa. Queen Antrain, 5 stars. This is the card that Green is going to get behind in the next few months. Yes, it's expensive, but it's worth it because it's game-winningly strong. It's 3 bodies in 1 card that can all immediately attack to take advantage of her second effect. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I want to talk about a card that pairs great with Antrain. Great Alvar Plains, 5 stars. For starters, it exhausts something when you play this. You get its second effect online. You attack with Antrain first, and then you attack with your Ant tokens, which are spirits with no listed effects. Basically, your opponent needs to have some kind of answer or they'll be overrun by the ants. So yes, I think Queen Antrain is going to be a menace. Ant-Man General, 5 stars. This card goes right into the Antrain deck. It's also just a good card for any green deck. Amaranth Man, 4 stars. This is one of the better ramping options for green. I don't know if it'll be a staple in all green decks, but it's definitely going to see a lot of play. Worker Ant-Man, 3 stars. I'm torn on this card. I can't tell if this is actually good or if it's only good going second. This card is going to see a lot of experimentation, but I predict that it's going to fall off eventually. Armor Tree Deity Heracdinus, 2 stars. It's a really cool card that gives things in hand like Emerald Pincer Swift. This is a card that desperately wants you to have draw support to fully take advantage of this effect, which means you have to go off color to do so. And if you do that, it's just going to make the deck too clunky, in my opinion. But speaking of, Emerald Pincer, 5 stars. This is basically Green's version of Valkyrie Mist, and while it's not quite as good as that, it fulfills a similar purpose. This is going to be a staple in green decks. Mushrantula. This is another card that I'm torn on. How good is discarding the worst card from your opponent's hand? To me, it's a 3-star card. I think this is a matchup-dependent card. Against purple, it's certainly iffy, since half the time they'll be discarding an Immortal Spirit. Against white or green, it is really annoying. We'll have to see where this lands. Heaven's Cloak Butterfly, 5 stars. In my opinion, this is the premier ramp card most green decks will play. And yes, this can put the core onto itself. This will be the standard going forward when other ramp cards are released. Yaiba no Kami, 2 stars. Buffing your small guys to 4K is not good enough to make a deck around, in my opinion. At best, this'll be a tech card for green. Horned Fortress Elasmuth, 1 star. This card is too expensive. Basically requires you to play Yaiba no Kami to make this worthwhile, and there's a better version of this in Fanelore Tree Reflexio, which I'm giving 5 stars. This card is the backup to Queen Antrain. Either it's exhausting 3 guys, or it's dealing a damage and exhausting a guy. I think this card is cracked. Ezo Wolf, 2 stars. If Emerald Pincer did not exist, I think I would have rated this higher. It's a card that I think doesn't quite make the cut. Its stats aren't quite high enough to effectively take advantage of Gale in the early to mid game. Loyal Retainer Higumaru. 1 star. This card seems decent until you realize that the opponent can just select spirits that have already been exhausted, making its effect too awkward for its own good. Hunger Tree. Similar to Mushrantula, this is a card I have a hard time evaluating. This one's not quite as annoying because it doesn't discard until it's destroyed, but I don't know if that necessarily makes it worse, since it avoids when summoned burst effects. That said, I do think Mushrantula is better, so I'll give this 2 stars. Koju Kamakiro, 1 star. Needing the Soul Core to exhaust isn't that big of a deal, but just play Aldeed instead. Great Tree Gate. 1 star. It takes too much effort to take advantage of its first effect. Infinite Ant Undercity. Hesitant 2 stars. I recognize this essentially discounts Queen Antrain and Ant-Man General. I just don't think there's room for this card. Giant Wood Castle Keep. 5 stars. This Nexus is crazy. Being able to turn one of your spirits into essentially an infinite blocker goes a long way. That being said, there is a world where Derm Dyna and Arcana Joker are so prevalent in the meta that this card isn't going to save you. I still think this card is good in spite of that possibility, but do keep that in mind. The Ants Strike Back. 4 stars. I do wish the tokens didn't come in exhausted, but that probably would have been busted. This will see some play with Queen Antrain, and I could even see this played in aggro decks just to keep guys on board. Thorn Prison, 5 stars. This card is a staple. I could even see this being played in non-green decks. I think it's that good. Carry Core, 2 stars. Simply put, it's too situational. I know this can ramp a ton of cores for you. I just don't like the idea of spending a card to do so. I think to make a card like this worth it, you would need to gain at least 4 cores, and I don't see that happening often enough. Stamina Recovery, 1 star. Basically, I think Green would rather play Star Blessed Draw over this card. And Insect Aura, 1 star. It's just a bad BP boost card. Green will definitely come into the meta swinging. While not everything is viable, there's going to be a lot of variety in the color. The best way to build the color will be pure green, with Ice Shield of course, but there will be experimentations with combining it with other colors, particularly white and purple. I don't think those will be as successful as Queen Antrain and her ant army, but I'm still excited to see what's in store. If you found this video to be helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more Battle Spirits Saga content. Until next time, laters.